Hello, everybody. We are starting our NaMo Home Evening for July of 2018. This is our monthly hangout where we just get together, hang out, with the listeners. If the Patreons want to join us on patreon.com/nakedmormonism, you get access to join the actual call in real time, or you can watch along on the live stream, of course, on the Naked Mormonism YouTube channel. We have a featured guest every month, and this month's featured guest is Colleen Dietz of the Mormon Happy Hour. Colleen, thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely. I wouldn't miss it for the world.
We have so much to talk about because for these NaMo Home Evenings, I usually don't invite on ex-Mormons because they come on to Naked Mormonism so frequently and now onto the Glassbox podcast. So it's fun to talk with another ex-Mormon because I feel like we have a kind of like a kindred spirit, right? We share the same kind of background, but you have... You've had a very unique walk in Mormonism, and I'd really like to explore a little bit. So obviously, you are the host of the Mormon Happy Hour podcast. You grew up in the church. Mormon Happy Hour is not so friendly to Mormonism. At least you don't exactly cover the best
friendly.
Side. Yeah. I mean,
okay, that's true.
Let's just say you don't tend to focus on the Mormon newsroom releases of the new temples announced so much as you do, like President Nelson saying that tithing will break the poverty cycle in Nigeria. So there's just a selection bias. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm just going on.
So true.
Here, but tell us how you got to start a podcast about Mormonism from the post-Mormon perspective.
Quite a journey. I'll try and keep it real super short. I had the idea to do a podcast during my during my faith crisis, basically. I went inactive following a pretty nasty divorce, which we'll talk about that later. I pulled away. I didn't go, but I still believed. I still intended to go back. But then I went public with the BYU rape scandal with my own experience. And during that, I had to kind of deal with a lot of, repressed trauma and baggage at the same time that I was being basically excluded from my faith community because I was seen as an enemy to the church because I was sharing my experience at BYU. And you can't do that. So I needed a place to kind of talk about it. And that's kind of where the idea came from. So I really wanted to do the podcast so I could talk about everything I was going through. But then I quickly realized that wasn't a very sustainable model. Like, who wants to talk about sexual assault forever? Like, I can't do it. So I was like, this sucks. And so that's where Mormon Happy Hour was born, is I'm like, I need a happy place where I can still stay connected to the ex-Mormon community, but not in a way that brings me down. I need something that lifts me up. And so that's kind of where the idea came to pass. Is that a drinking cue?
It is now. Everybody, whatever you got, pile it down. Yep, I love it.
So yeah, I tried to make Mormon Happy Hour the lighthearted, kind of break from the seriousness of the faith crisis and what is ex-Mormonism. So we like to poke fun and laugh and talk about what life is like after you leave the church.
Cult. It is. No, I find it interesting because it seems like a lot of members are surprised to learn that there are like ex-Mormon support groups and like therapists that specialize in ex-Mormonism, and like they don't understand that that's a thing. But like there's a sense of I don't know. I can't point to any specific one emotion when you leave, right? It's just such a big mess of betrayal and anger and frustration and a loss of loved connections that you have to kind of process and deal with when you first leave the church. And for a lot of people, there's still that connection, that familial connection, even though you may not believe in the church itself. So good. I think it's good to start up a group, start up a Facebook group, and then eventually into a podcast where you can kind of get that sense of community. There's obviously a need for it.
Yeah, totally.
So what somebody who's never listened to Mormon Happy Hour, somebody who like me, or somebody who isn't like me and hasn't gone through the entire backlog, what do they hear when they click download on an episode of Mormon Happy Hour?
Well, I cover current events. I also like to bring in life pro tips. So the current events, like you said, is going to be like what President Nelson said in this country for a press release, or we talk about, the youth guidelines and how they've revised them once again, but they totally fucked up again, and just like we talk about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then the life pro tips, like first time drinking tips and how to keep yourself hydrated, and the one that I really liked that we told just the other day was the first time you're drinking, how to know when you're drunk is to count the number of times you pee that night. And once you've lost count of how many times you've peed, you're drunk.
I know there are some, well, because there's a lot of physiological stuff that goes into like needing to pee a lot when you start drinking. But like, I know there's some bars that like they'll do a thing where they have like free alcohol for the entire night until the first person pees, and then when that happens, break the seal, yeah, that's that's totally a thing. So after you break the seal, if you lose count, yeah, it's maybe
you're done.
Over to water or Gatorade for the rest of the night. It's a helpful tip, right? And it's something so weird about when we leave the church, we don't know so many of these things, right? Like you say life pro tips and they may seem so basic, but for somebody who comes out of the church and, especially drinking tips, we just don't know. Like we need those tips in order to learn and survive and integrate into the real world. Right.
Exactly. We didn't have the same adolescent upbringing that everyone else did, an introduction to alcohol when we were coming out of high school or in high school. No, I was 35 the first time I started drinking. 35! Like, I missed a lifetime of experiences.
So what have you, I mean, obviously there's the difference between not going to church anymore and then starting to learn about the church or integrate into the community of ex-Mormonism once you do leave the church. What has that been like for you?
Oh gosh. Well, I feel like I have some faith transition privilege because I don't live in Utah. So when I decided to, not only did I not live in Utah, but I left my home ward. I moved states, and as part of my divorce, I left my whole life behind, and the church was something that I threw out with my divorce and just was like, I need to kind of like just reevaluate everything and throw everything out and then start putting things back in one at a time. And so the church was one of the things I threw out, and I didn't have any real external forces bringing me back into the church. Like I had my parents, obviously, who are still TBMs, but so there was like familial pressure to stay in the church, but
right.
Everyone that I interacted with on a daily basis was not part of the church. And so it was pretty easy for me to transition out and become more acclimated with the real life. Now, deep down inside, when it comes to like experiences and like, oh my God, like alcohol is evil and, sexual promiscuity and blah, blah, blah. Like that whole world was still like that's still Mormon. So it was like, that was an adjustment, but the pressure to stay in the church wasn't really there. So I don't know.
Well, and obviously that's different for everybody, or I shouldn't say different. It's unique for everybody, right? Where a lot of us, we kind of go through similar things when we leave, of the familial pressures to stay, whether that's parents, kids, family member, siblings or whatever, and the pressure to stay, but also like the pressures from the outside world of like, wow, Mormonism is bullshit, and trying to balance that and trying to figure out what to do it's unique for everybody. Everybody kind of walks a different path, but it's still, I still enjoy hearing those stories. Anytime somebody is willing to share that. And that's like one reason why I love going to Sunstone, is because you can really, sit down with somebody and talk about that. If you want, if they want, you can engage in that conversation and say, what brought you out of the church? What caused your shelf to break, that proverbial, Mormon shelf? What caused it to crack? What caused it to finally fall down? So
And I feel like in that respect, I'm pretty different because my conclusion that the church was not somewhere where I wanted to be had nothing to do with church history, really didn't have much to do with like doctrine or policy. Like obviously the way they handled LGBT issues always bothered me from the time I was in high school. So that was a long time shelf item. But because it had bothered me since high school, it wasn't something I would ever decided to leave the church over. What I left the church over was personal experiences that led me to conclude that the church is not a safe place when it comes to sexual predators and how they handle them and how they fail to handle them repeatedly, even in my own life. And I just realized it wasn't a safe place and it wasn't somewhere that I wanted to be. And that's why I stepped back, because I didn't feel safe. And I always hoped that I would be able to work out my own feelings and then return. But in the meantime, the BYU thing came up. I felt rejected from my culture, my faith culture. And then that caused me to really dive deep into church history when it comes to polygamy and the whole the church, basically the foundation of sexism and exploitation and manipulation and lies and, all of that. That's still alive today. And to me, like, that's the root of the issues today. And so that's when I was like, yeah, I'm done. Like, I don't want anything to do with this anymore. I don't believe that it's divine. I'm done. Like, I came to know what I thought was God as a child. And then, learning the truth about the church, I'm like, that's not any God I want to believe in. Like, no.
Well, and your podcast started up about the same time that the Joseph Bishop and McKenna Denson rape scandal started, making its way into the public sphere. And there's some profoundly problematic ways that the church and the culture of Mormonism treat sex and sexuality. And I think a lot of that is not only rooted in the church's history itself, but just in the history of human culture, right? I mean, we do have a lot of problems when we view our own sexuality just as a human species. So what has that been like to watch this story develop kind of in this as a microcosm of the problems that the church has when it comes to viewing sexuality, in your opinion?
I'm really, really grateful for it. I really am, because
good.
Like, now it's been 2 years since I went public with BYU. And even 2 years ago, it was a lot different than I feel like it is right now today. We're learning more. It's becoming much more, publicized and widespread. And the Joseph Bishop McKenna Denson scandal is like, that outshadows the BYU scandal, in my opinion. And so, the more the better. I'm grateful that women like McKenna have the strength to come forward, and, her statute of limitations is passed. And she's at a point where she has nothing to lose, and she's just going to do it because it's the right thing to do. And so, like, I'm really encouraged by that. And also, unfortunately, I mean, it sucks what she has to endure, but I'm also grateful that the things that she's enduring are being publicized, like
right.
In regards to like the docket that was produced by the church, and the fact that the daughter that she put up for adoption, all of the information that she was provided from the age of 16, she found out because of LDS Social Services that she was a product of rape. And that's a disgusting, like, in my opinion, the LDS Social Services has no business doing what they do, because they're so unprofessional. They cause real harm in people's lives. And there's so many stories. I have a cousin who has a very similar story. I mean, obviously he wasn't a product of rape, but there was so much that wasn't redacted that should have been. Like, they're just not careful when it comes to adoptions. A closed adoption is just botched at every turn through LDS Social Services. And like, it worked out fine for him, but hearing his story and then listening and knowing McKenna Denson's daughter's story, I'm like, do they get any adoption right? Because I know 2 for 2 that they sucked at.
Yeah, right. I mean, obviously, there's the church does try to stick its fingers in every possible pie, right? They try and have the therapy services, the family services, employment and welfare services, all of these different services. And I think that when the church itself is diversified to the point that it has all these different things that it tries to, all this infrastructure built up, things are going to slip through the cracks. And when people like McKenna Denson's daughter slip through the cracks, obviously your friend slipped through the cracks, like real lives are hurt from that. That's a problem.
Right.
And to see that the church does have the resources to fix these things, and it has this grandiose sense of its own morality, that it should be better than the secular versions of all these services that they offer, and we see that these cases are slipping through the cracks, I think that's worth talking about. That needs to be part of the conversation. And especially when we talk about with McKenna Denson and the docket that they put together about her specifically, what was the motivation behind that? I mean, what's your opinion? What do you think the reasoning behind that was, that they made that?
Oh, they absolutely were trying to smear her and discredit her, and not only by making her look not credible as a source, as a victim, but also to scare her into stopping, and to send a message to other survivors that if you dare accuse anyone, in church hierarchy of sexual misconduct, this is what will happen to you. Right. We will do this to you. We can do it. This is what it looks like. This is what it's going to be like for you. So you better keep your mouth shut unless you want this to happen to you. And they're good at it. I mean, look at them. They have their own law firm that is absolutely, and the whole entire Mormon culture from the day you're born, it's a self-policing culture. Like we're all taught to look out for one another and to turn people in because it's the right thing to do. And if you really love them, you'll turn them in,
So why shouldn't that apply to the institution itself, right? If there's problems in the institution, it's up to the members to point out that there's a problem here. But unfortunately, there's just resounding. Yeah, right. Anything that doesn't come from the top down, no, fuck that. We don't talk about problems from the church within the institution itself. No. It's the perfect institution. It's led by God. There's no problems with it. The people are the problem. I don't know how to square that circle exactly.
So I saw the best atheist quote the other day that says, "In the beginning, man formed God in his own image." Man, I'm like, oh,
yeah, exactly. That's not the royal man.
That's it. I'm like, man, that's like the LDS Church right there. Like top down, man at the top. God, God is what we want it to be. God is what we subscribe. Like God just echoes what we think is right.
Right. Ugh. It's interesting how the unchanging God of the Bible is so malleable to the time and culture that worships this God. It's so weird. So weird. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about this, and for any listeners who are watching this who may have sensitive ears to some extent, even though we've already kind of fucked this up a little bit. You do the Mormon sex myth segment, and I want to dive into some of these because I think that is probably one of the best segments on Mormon Happy Hour, because it's so crucial to understand the non-Mormon version of sexuality that exists out there. What are in your time, you've done a ton of these segments by now. What are some of the more prominent sex myths that kind of stand out to you?
Well, there's lots of misogyny, which is really gross. So it's weird because you get into these sex myths and like some of them are hilarious, but then a large portion of them are sad, and then another large portion of them are just fucking frustrating and make you angry. And so, there's just this gamut. And so I try and kind of keep the mix going so that we can keep it lighthearted. But every once in a while, you get to these situations where it's just not funny anymore. like some of them that are not funny are there's a perpetuated myth that wearing tampons and gynecological visits will take away your virginity. And so women in the church will refrain from going to the gynecologist because, for fear that they're going to ruin their virginity. And I'm like, okay, oh God, like that's disturbing. That's you missing out on real medical care because of your fucked up religious beliefs that are wrong. And then, and the whole tampon thing is whatever, but it's still disturbing, And the quote, when that one was shared with me, it came from a young woman's teacher. So she learned it in a young women's class, and the young women's teacher, shared that this was her personal belief about tampons and gynecological visits, and she wanted the first thing inside her to be her husband. So she was going to refrain and keep herself pure, and so she wasn't going to partake in those things. And I'm like, oh my God. So,
wow,
that's my like upsetting side. Yeah.
And then that has some really long-term ramifications too. Wow, that's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah. And then the ones on the funnier side are oh God, like there's one that I just told in our most recent episode that I released today, and I'll have to there is a lesson in the Spencer W. Kimball manual, and I'll have to pull it up so that I can skim through it. But basically, I was collecting sex myths, and one was shared with me. Someone said something about just the tip, and then someone else jumped in the conversation and were like, wait, just the tip? There was a lesson about that. And I'm like, wait, what? So we had to go back, and let me see if I can find the link for you. Oh God, it was hilarious. Here it is. Teaching Spencer W. Of course it was Spencer W. fucking Kimball, right? Yeah, who teaches awful things about sex. Mm-hmm. Okay, so chapter 10. So I can dive right into it. No, it's in this is the address, www.lds.org/manual/teachings-Spencer W. Kimball /chapter 10. Like, it's there live right now.
It's on LDS.org. This is gospel, what you're about to preach to us. All right.
Yes. So, are you ready? This is a just the tip story. All right. So the situation is reminiscent of the fable of the camel and his owner who were traveling across the desert sand dunes when a windstorm came up. The traveler quickly set up his tent and moved in, closing the flaps to protect himself from the cutting, grinding sands of the raging storm. Flaps? Like, okay, already it's getting a little, graphic. We're talking flaps. Close the flaps. Keep out the cutting, grinding sand. Woo! All right, Spencer. The camel was, of course, left outside.
Yeah. What? What was that?
So the camel was left, of course, outside, and the violent wind hurled in the sand against his body and into his eyes and nostrils, and he found it unbearable and finally begged for entrance into the tent. I mean, you really feel bad for the camel. I feel bad for the camel. This poor camel.
Yeah, his head's blue by this point. Poor thing.
Blue with the sand.
Yeah.
Oh, with the pressure. So there is room for only myself, said the traveler. But may I just get my nose in so I can breathe the air, not fill the sand? Asked the camel. Well, perhaps you could do that, replied the traveler. Oh, can't you just hear the rhetoric between, the BYU co-ed and the pre-missionary when he's just really, really just trying to work it in? Just a little bit.
It's like a lip balm. Just swirl it around the sides. Yeah, it's okay.
It's just a little bit.
Yep.
So
the
then,
sand out here, it's unbearable. It's so cold with my dick hanging out. Gotta get in a warm place.
Well, perhaps you could do that, replied the traveler. He opened the flap ever so little, and the long nose of the camel entered. For fuck's sake! How comfortable the camel was now. But soon the camel became wary of the smarting sand on his ears and eyes. The wind-driven sand is like a rasp in my head. Can I put just my head in? Oh, God. Just a little bit more. Come on, just a little bit more. Again, the traveler rationalized that to acquiesce would do him no damage, for the camel's head could occupy the space at the top of the tent, which he himself was not using. So the camel put his head inside, and the beast was satisfied again. The beast was satisfied again. Oh, God.
Oh, my God. This is amazing. Oh, my.
But for a short while only. Just the front quarters, he begged. And again, the traveler relented, and soon the camel's front shoulders and legs were in the tent. Finally, by the same process of pleading and of yielding, the camel's torso, his hindquarters, and all were in the tent. Wow, that's like, I don't know, that's a lot.
What?
But now it was too crowded. What?
I'm just wondering why we read DNC 132 on My Book of Mormon. Why didn't we read this? This is fucking gold. Oh my God. Thank you, Spencer Dubb. Wow.
Oh God.
Like, I never knew that the penis could be so accurately portrayed as a camel, but it's blowing my mind.
Right? The humps. You nailed the humps.
The humps. Yep.
His long
yep.
nose.
The biting sand out here in the cold. Yep. And a tent is perfect. Why use an analogy? Yeah, flaps. Why use a flower with petals? A tent with flaps in the wind is much more pleasing to the eye.
Oh, that's so fucking sexy, man. A tent with flap. I mean, you don't even need meat curtains at that point. Just a tent, honey. I'm really digging your tent, babe. Oh man.
It's best to like roll up the sides first before the camel gets in there. Then because you don't want the outside flaps to go all the way in, and it's just really uncomfortable for the camel, really uncomfortable for the tent. Sometimes the tent just collapses when you do that. God, it's the worst.
I think I need to go to my bishop now, Bryce. That was too much.
Is your tent staked, Colleen? Scout camp would have taken on a whole new tone if I knew this analogy. Who wants to join me in the tent? Let's build a fire in there.
Pitch a tent.
Wow.
Oh God. So yeah, that's the end of the story. So we all know how that ended. We know how that ended.
Yep. And then the camel just sat in the tent, soaking in the warmth away from the biting sand. For anyone not Mormon, soaking is a Mormon term. That's a whole thing. I can't remember. Have you done the soaking on Mormon sex myths?
Mentioning it like every time we do Mormon sex myths, because somehow it leads back to soaking.
Yeah, but have you taken it on head on? I can't remember hearing you say explicitly what soaking is. Okay, good.
We did. So you need to check out the episode that we did, the drinking game with Ryan McKnight, where we did Drinking Truth or Dare with Ryan McKnight. And after that game was over, and we were all liquored up. We'd taken lots and lots of liberal shots. Then we talked about soaking.
That's right. Oh my God, I had forgotten.
Oh yeah, it was good, and we have re-entered into soaking several times since then, because how can you not?
Re-entered.
Yep. Yeah, I did.
Wait, you did.
Welcome.
Yep. Oh wow.
So something that we kind of hinted at that has to do with soaking that's coming up in our next episode: earth-quaking. So if you want to cheat and ruin everything for you, you can Urban Dictionary earth-quaking. I don't even know if it exists outside of Provo, but earth-quaking is a thing in Provo, and it requires more than 2 people. So that's exciting. And soaking.
No. Wait, what? What? That doesn't work in my mind for Mormon stuffs. Hang on, walk me through this. Is that just a teaser? Is that what you're gonna do? No, I gotta hear it. I gotta know. Please help me.
Okay. So here it comes. Don't spoil it for my listeners. So here's earth-quaking. This is a new BYU thing. So soaking is the thing. I don't know if we've defined it yet, you and I, right here, right now. Soaking is where, because God is a T-Rex, And if you stop moving, he can't see you.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
The soaking is where there's insertion and then you stop moving completely and you just marinate in there because God can't see you, you know.
I'm so turned on right now.
Blood soaking.
Oh, wow. So weird.
So earthquaking is where you take it up a couple steps and you have an accomplice, a third or fourth party accomplice. And this works best on a bunk bed, which I know they have bunk beds in Centennial and Centennial 2 and all around BYU campus there are bunk beds. So, you're in the top bunk soaking. You have previously enlisted your roommates to assist. So you're soaking. Your roommates are on the bottom bunk kicking the mattress.
Oh my god. Oh.
So then you are not accountable for any movement that happens. No. That was not you. That was just an earthquake.
Just the earthquake.
You were just soaking.
Oh my god! And nobody's responsible too for it, right? It's not the roommate's fault. No. It's not the camel's fault. It's not the tent's fault. It's just
perfect.
It's just a happenstance. It's just and then good things happen.
Yeah,
and nobody.
I tripped and fell, and it happened. It was I don't know what happened.
Right. It's like winning the lottery. You just got to buy the ticket, and then if it so happens that you win the jackpot, then just you had no control over it, right? It's just a fact of life. People win the jackpot all the time. Oh my god! Thank you so much, Colleen. Oh my! I'm going to do that so much now. Oh, you just blew my mind. Officially blew my mind.
Let's not talk about blowing. That's too much.
Not the regular blowing? Is there a Mormon blowing?
I don't know. I'll look into that. I don't think so. I don't know.
Okay. That sounds
that was another thing when I was a Mormon. You know, what are blowjobs? Like, how's that, babe?
Trying to inflate it? Yes.
Is that good?
They make machines for that, Colleen. They're much safer. Got to form the hermetic seal on there. It's a whole thing. Okay. So Mormon sex myths, they are obviously a dime a dozen. What are some life pro tips? Because obviously it's like when Mormonism is like your body is this temple and like you can't desecrate it. You can't do anything to let anybody uninvited into your temple. They have to have the recommend to get in. That's like dealing with sex specifically, but life pro tips are like, it's okay to have tattoos and multiple body piercings. And like, what are some of the life pro tips that you've had more feedback on?
People really like the drink suggestions. That's probably one of our most popular things is they're like, thank you so much for giving the drink suggestions because we don't know what the fuck we're doing. And so, we like to give one or two per episode of like, and I'll just recipe it out, both liquor and coffee. Because we're just as noobs when it comes to coffee as we are with liquor. And so I talk about, like, I've been experimenting with French press and cold brew. And so I'll talk about my cold brew recipe. And we also talk a lot about just being authentic. And, you get to be in charge of your life and to stop giving control, stop second guessing yourself, like really embrace yourself and fall in love with yourself and get in tune with who you are and what you want. And stop living under the constructs that you have for, all of your life up until you left the church. So that's kind of exciting. I mean, that's kind of the positive thing of a faith transition, is that you get to relearn. I mean, it's scary because the life,
Right.
like the floor gets pulled out from under you and you're just free falling. But then once you figure out what your parachutes are, and then you kind of learn that it's kind of fun to kind of re-explore and learn everything from a totally novel, like it's like you're for lack of a non-Christian term, but it's like you're born again
right?
as a new person. You're born again as an atheist.
Well, let's dive into that a little bit, because I think this is an interesting conversation. What is it that you think causes Mormons, when they're inside the church, to not be authentic, that requires this rediscovery once we leave the church?
Well, when you're in the church, you're told how to think, what questions are okay and are not okay to ask. And when you have original thought, if it doesn't fall in line with the prescribed correlated doctrine or, cultural status quo, then you're told to stop questioning, doubt your doubts, stay in the boat. All of those little catchphrases that discourage authenticity and original thought. And I mean, you just take a daily trip down ex-Mormon Reddit, and there's, stories of people thoughts being suppressed at church, or a dime a dozen, because that's the culture. Is individuality is horribly discouraged within the Mormon church.
Because it's
And
hard
so
to
that's
control
just
people when they're individuals, right?
exactly, because individual thought. I mean, one of my favorite, most well-known stories is it was Sherry Dew, who she what manual was it? Was it for the Young Women's that she was called to the Young Women's presidency, or the Relief Society presidency, one of the presidencies, and she put a lot of time and effort into kind of retooling the lesson manual, and she spent lots of time and really perfecting what she thought would be the best messages to teach the women of the church. And she was really excited about it, and she presented it to the first presidency of the Quorum of the 12, and they're like, "Oh yeah, no, sorry, we already have a manual. We already did it. Please just throw that away." And it was devastating to her because she spent so
Right.
much time and effort on it, and then she couldn't use any of it. She wasn't ever consulted for
It
her
was the brethren.
opinion
The
on
brethren
something
did
that
it.
she was called to. Yeah, she was called to preside over something, and she was not ever asked her opinion or her input on leading that thing, that group. Nope, you don't get it. You don't get a say. And so, to me, that's just the level of control, and just, you can't be original. It doesn't matter if what you're doing is the right thing to do. It's not in line with what we've already decided you're going to do. So you need to just, be done with that. So, and I think the once you transition out of that, for me, I know what happened for me. You feel like, the ground is ripped out from underneath you and you're free falling because you have no more structure. And it's scary at first. It's scary.
Right.
Because you don't know, all of a sudden I had to go back to square one and question everything. Well, is there a pre-existence? Is there life before Earth? And I had to, everything. Is there a God? Just the basics are now up for debate, because well, if this religious structure that I've been raised underneath is not legit, then what else is not legit that I've been taught since I was a child? But once you can work through that fear and that really scary part, then the part where you get to rediscover is really exciting. And so, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think there's something to be said about Mormonism being this glass castle, right? Where when it throws bombs at all the other religions, teaches you Mormonism is this scorched earth policy where every other religion out there is delusion. Mormonism is the one true religion. And as soon as that glass castle shatters in your mind, you're left to reconstruct everything from the ground up. And I think so often it happens that that is done sans all religion. When you are taught
Yeah.
to have this idea that Mormonism is the only true religion, that everything else out there is nothing, it is not even worth paying mind to. When you stop
Mm-hmm.
believing in Mormonism, I mean, it creates a lot of atheists, right? A lot of people leave Mormonism and never go into another church, and they're plenty happy. But honestly, my favorite day on Reddit is Sunday, when it's all the "Where will you go" posts, right? Because
Yeah.
it's people
Uh-huh.
who like that, just for some background, I believe it was Jeffrey R. Holland that said, "Where will you go if if you're not part of the church? Where will you go?" And people have
Mhm.
kind of appropriated that, where they're just like, well, I'm just going to go do this. I'm going to go with my family to the zoo. I'm going to go on a hike. I'm going to drink
Mhm.
beer, afternoon beer at this awesome diner. Like, people just say, this is my life. I am rebuilding it how I want it to be rebuilt. And um I think more than anything, that goes to show how much of our life and culture is constructed around the church. When we leave, we are forced to reconstruct everything that we know about reality. That
Mhm.
shows a level of control that is just, it's not something you can describe, right? It's ineffable how overreaching the power of the church is in molding and shaping our personalities, our culture, our communication, and everything that it
Yeah.
is to be us. And then when you, like you said, and you have that rug pulled out from under you, there's a lot of work to be done. You have to realize, what the hell is this world that I live in? It's beautiful, it's big, it's scary. I don't know what's going on. Now I have to
Mhm.
reconstruct from the bottom up. I'm born again. Now I got to get my legs. I got to relearn language. I got to go back to school. Like,
Yeah.
it's a whole process.
Yeah. It really is. And I don't think, like, I remember when I was kind of going through my faith crisis and I was in the middle of this kind of scary phase, like, my next door neighbor she's a Christian and she goes to like a Life Point church. I think those are pretty common. But I mean, she's great. And she's a Christian. She believes in God, but she's very down to earth. And I really enjoyed reflecting with her because I was in a really scary spot and I was just kind of like, I don't know if I believe in God anymore. I don't know, and I don't think that even she really understood how fucking scary it was for me. Because I mean, Christianity is not as rigid and all consuming even as Mormonism is. And so for her, she isn't even really understanding, like for her, a church is a church. But for Mormons, your religion is
Church is
everything. It's who
life.
you date.
Yep.
Yeah, it's who you date. It prescribes how you talk, what you eat, what you drink. Like it is so high. It's a high demand religion where, regular mainstream Christianity is not at all that way. So, I don't know. It's just my thought.
I think it obviously, I mean, it depends on where you come from, right? Like, and I think that the more insular and the more, controlling a religious, a specific religion is, the more it's able to
Mm-hmm.
cast aspersions at other religions. So, like, Mormonism is really insular, but, obviously, like, Southern
Yeah.
Baptists are very insular as well, and they have their whole culture. And like the two churches are like constantly lobbing bombs at each other. So I think it just kind of breaks down
Yeah.
of like what, like how insular your community is, and how much control
Mhm.
that you are, the church is granted over a person's life. And I mean, it varies, but I think by and large, exhibiting that level of control, I think, shows that not all religions are cults and not all cults are religions, but it just so happens there's a
Mhm.
lot of overlap. And Mormonism is a religion that is a cult. Southern Baptists, I mean, it could be argued that they are a religion that is a cult, but there are religions that don't have the cult like tendencies. And there are cults that may not be
Mhm.
particularly religious. It just that, Mormonism lies happily on the inside of that Venn diagram.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's, yeah, I want to talk, I want to broach this subject too. And this goes, I mean, it dovetails off of what we're talking about quite well, I think. And that is, you experience something in Mormon culture that a lot of people haven't experienced, because when you leave the church, you're still counted on the rolls. You're still a member in their 16 million member number that they use. But it takes you actively sending a letter in or using quitmormon.org in order to get your name taken off of the rolls. But for a temple marriage, that's a whole other thing. Can you tell us a little bit about what it takes to get divorced in the church?
Wow. It's awful. And it's one of those things that I feel like it's another control thing that the church has. It's this unnecessary control that they have, and they insist on maintaining over your free agency. So when you get a divorce in the LDS faith, a legal divorce, you are divorced in the eyes of the land and everything. You are no longer husband and wife. You're done. You're separate. No more. Well, your temple sealing will always remain. Always. And the
that's
only way...
I'm sorry, I have to pause you because that's something I never thought about. You can get divorced on earth, but when you die, then suddenly you're married again. Wow. How horribly invasive. That sounds like that is so shitty to do. You hated this person on earth, and now when you die, you're stuck with them for fucking eternity. Fuck you. That's horrible. That is an incredibly immoral teaching.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Like,
I'm
even
sorry.
as it, like, I it's terrible. Like, I think about TBMs because they believe in these ordinances and these, like, a TBM will get divorced from this spouse for good reason, that they don't want to be with this person ever again. But then to know that they are still sealed with them for eternity, to know that. And I mean, there's this other issue where, like, men know the temple, the new name of their wives, so they can call them in heaven, and so he'll know how to find you in heaven. And such a mind fuck. Like, so frustrating. So if you decide, I mean, the complications with this temple sealing that never gets canceled is that men can apply for a clearance from Salt Lake. So they're cleared to be sealed again. So say the man finds a new spouse, a new fiance, they want to get married. He just has to apply and say, hey, I'm already sealed to, Joan over here, but I want to get sealed to Sally as well. The church will be like, oh, that's totally fine. Sure. Go right ahead. And the other fucked up thing that the church does, hang on, is they send a letter to his previous spouse and say, hey, guess what? Your ex is getting remarried, and guess what else? They're going to get sealed in the temple, and you're all three going to be sealed together. Are you okay with that? Okay, great.
That was my question. Holy shit. That's...
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's so infuriating. Oh my... So, like, the sealing to the previous wife is not annulled. It's not removed. It's not nullified. It's like... No, you're just a polygamist now. You're just a church-recognized polygamist for eternity.
Yes. Against your will.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
This is a wedding that was decided is over, but according to Mormonism, sorry, you're still married, and you're still gonna be married when you go to heaven. And now you have a sister wife. Hope you like her.
Holy fuck.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing is, like, in order to get sealed to somebody else, say this Mormon woman gets that letter that now they're sealed in a threesome, right? And if they want to get married to somebody else in the temple, like that sealing, is that nullified, the previous sealing, in order for them to go forward with another sealing? Or are they just like, God will sort that all out?
So for women, this is the other thing, is men here on the earth, men can be sealed to as many wives as they want. As many. They can all be living. Some of them can be dead. Doesn't matter. The church doesn't care. You can be a widow and remarry, and you're sealed to both. You can get a divorce and remarry. You're sealed to both. Men can get it sealed to as many women as they can because #polygamy. Women, if a woman wants to get remarried, then she has to get the sealing canceled. Now, for the longest time, even when I got a divorce in 2012. So even when I got a divorce, only in 2012, the only way a woman could get her temple sealing canceled is if she was ready to go to the temple. And they had a date scheduled. It was ready to go. Once she had a temple date, then she could apply for the temple sealing cancellation from her previous spouse. And so because I obviously didn't have that lined up when I got a divorce, I was told, yeah, no, sorry, you can't cancel your sealing to your sexually predatory ex-husband. You're just stuck with him because you don't have someone to get sealed to right away. And so I just was like, great. And in my situation, this is where it gets really important. Everyone has unique horror stories. This is just mine. They are crazy unique. But my situation was that my ex-husband was he lost his mind when I filed for divorce, and I moved to Arizona and he stalked and harassed me. He put a tracking device on my car. He would send me text messages of friends' houses that I would park in front of after he had pulled up all of the facts he could about whoever's house I pulled up in front of. Like, it was awful. It was horrid.
Hang on. So
he stalked and harassed me.
So Julie just said, and you have to write a letter saying why they were bad and why you should be unsealed, I assume is what she meant. So, you have to tell them why you want to be unsealed beyond just I'm no longer married to them, and articulate that this is an abusive person that's tracking me, that's like fucking putting tracking devices on me. Fuck me. That's wow. Sorry.
Yeah. So I'll get with my ex-husband when I took him to court and he was, on the stand talking about why he felt he maintained that he was justified in his behavior to the bitter end because I was his eternal wife.
Wow.
So
okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So even though for me,
you were
wasn't
his eternal
active in the
property.
Church.
That's what you are. You are his broodmare. Holy fuck. Wow. Okay.
So for me, that was my situation, and that's why I pursued a cancellation, because he was abusive, and I needed to cut any ties with him on this life. And when they say, "Oh, it'll all work out in the afterlife," I'm like, "But what about now? Because it's fucking my life up now. It's making my life awful now. I don't have time to wait to the afterlife. I want to fix it now. I deserve peace of mind right here." And I believe in a God, at least I did, that would, that wouldn't, "Oh, it'll all work out in the end. You just need to deal with it here on the earth." And there's so many TBMs out there that believe that go with that suffer. Like Carolyn Pearson wrote an entire book in, the Ghosts of Eternal Polygamy. Her entire book is this particular issue of how these sealings really, really, really destroy people here on the earth, right here, right now. And the "it'll all work out in the end" is just not good enough. It's not. So I can go into the process. Are you ready?
Yes, but before doing so, I want to ask, what do you think it is? Can you articulate that mentality of, so you suffer now, but in eternity, all will work out and it'll be cool? What is that?
It's a dismissal of people's real suffering is what I think it is. People don't take the time to care. They don't take the time to listen and really hear that people are suffering here and now. They dismiss it and they just say, "Oh, the atonement will cover your suffering. Oh, it'll all work out in the end and God will work it out. You won't be sealed to him in the afterlife." Well, what about fucking now? What about now? Like they dismiss it. They don't listen. They don't care. They don't hear and they don't understand.
It's when you don't have women who have to suffer through this in any leadership or decision-making or policy-making positions to do anything about this. People like you and like other divorced couples suffer every goddamn day for this, just because lack of empathy, lack of being able to understand that earthly suffering is a real goddamn problem. And just saying that it'll all work itself out in heaven, not good enough. It's not good enough, especially when you can do something. Yeah, I mean, especially when you can do something here on earth that will mitigate that suffering. That is immoral if you just say, no, we're not going to do anything about it now because after you die, everything's going to be okay. That is disturbing, immoral, and absolutely horrific. So I didn't want to cut you off. I wanted to just like introduce that to qualify what you're going to tell us about. And that's a process. How does that kind of work out?
You know, I actually had a thought. There was something else that I needed to tell you before I get into the process is I told you what women need to do to cancel their sealing, or I'm about to. But men, say you're a man and you decide that you don't want to be sealed to your ex-wife anymore. You want to be married to this new wife, or you just don't want her to be sealed to her anymore. You're done with her. You don't like her. She was abusive to your children and you don't want her in your life anymore. Whatever the excuse is, there are women out there who are abusive as well. So if a man wants to cancel his sealing, shit out of luck. There is no process for that.
For a man canceling his sealing? That's just not a thing?
Because #polygamy. No. We have a group on Facebook that we have formed because this is such an issue.
Right.
And the men that come into the group have endless suffering and red tape. And quite a few of them have actually gone all the way up the chain. They've talked to their area authority. They've talked to the 70. They've been pushed all the way up to the first presidency and they got a no. All the way back down the line. No. Sorry. We will not cancel your sealing. Because you're a man, you're a priesthood holder, polygamy, you just got to suck it up. You have 2 wives. Congratulations.
You can't get into the highest degree of the celestial kingdom unless you have more than 2. So fucking deal with it.
And
that's fucked up.
This is the mind fuck, because like here we are, we think that the church is patriarchal, that the church is sexist, that the church is always harder on women than it is in men. And then in this process alone, I'm like, wait, what? It's harder for men? What on earth else in the church is harder for men than it is for women? Just this, as far as I know. And it is because they hold so tight to this polygamy, that they won't even let a man out of his sealing. It blows my mind. And even in this, men don't get their own free agency. Men.
Julie said it perfectly. I guess they can be like Brigham Young and neglect their wives that they don't want. Yeah, right? Yeah, right. It's just put her out to pasture, we don't need to. That's a broodmare that's used up that I don't want to deal with anymore. The whole mentality is so disturbingly fucked. Everything about it is okay. So the process. Tell us the process now.
So
apparently this is the one thing in all of Mormonism that men can't do other than bear children. How for women wanting to get a celestial divorce, how does this work?
So how it works now, they have updated in the past 2 to 3 years, the policy has been updated that no longer do women have to have a pending subsequent sealing. Now
how progressive
you can apply. Right? And I mean, for God's sakes, I got divorced in 2012, not available to me. I had to wait until 2018? 2017. I had to wait until 2017, 2016 to even find out about it. Took me a year to do the process. So I was temple divorced in 2017. So the process, here's what you do. You meet with your bishop, your local bishop. It has to be your local bishop. If you're inactive or if you have resigned, you can still do it if you're resigned. If you're inactive, you've resigned, you don't know who your bishop is, you get on LDS.org, meeting house locator, you find who your local bishop is, and you petition him, you let him know, like contact the executive secretary, set up an appointment, let him know that the reason you didn't need an appointment is because you want a temple sealing cancellation. Chances are, because this is a recent policy, the bishop will not know the process. The bishop will then need to check with the stake president because the stake presidents are informed. And then he'll need to learn from the stake president what the procedure is to go through a temple sealing cancellation. And it involves lots of red tape. And so basically, to start the process, you meet with the bishop. The bishop will provide you with, he'll activate a form on LDS.org that you can then access through your membership ID. It will be, you log into LDS.org through your membership ID, and there the form will be. And then the form, I don't have the questions pulled up in front of me, but basically the form is antiquated from back when you needed a subsequent sealing. They have not updated the form since then to be, with this new policy. And so the questions still apply to that.
So there's like a box of like, when is your next sealing supposed to be? And it's like not even optional. Like, Jesus Christ.
So, a lot of where the problem comes in is a lot of the questions have to do with worthiness, temple worthiness. And that's the problem.
Of course.
Is because originally it was understood that you were going to the temple again. And so they just wrapped those worthiness questions right into the cancellation request to make sure that you were temple worthy before you proceeded with this cancellation. And so when you don't have a subsequent sealing, and the bishop, and this happened to me, this happens to every single person, woman or man who happens to go through it, they will ask you, one of the questions is, please list all transgressions since the day of your first sealing, whether they have been resolved with priesthood authority or not.
What?
And for me,
what?
Yeah. And they give you a square about this big, and I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, okay, number one, have you heard of the atonement? Number two, it's none of your fucking business. Number three, this has nothing to do with my petition to get a divorce from my ex-husband. My transgressions have no place in this request. They're not even relevant. And furthermore, I'm like, you really want me to remember? For me, it was 14 years since the date of my original sealing. You really want me to remember 14 years of transgressions? The ones that have been resolved and the ones that haven't?
Good Christ.
So when I got to that question, I had been prepped. I knew it was coming because I had been, getting support online from people who had done it before me. And so I knew the question was coming, and I had decided that it's not relevant. I'm just going to say none. No, I'm not responding.
Good.
And this was, you originally go through it with your bishop. So your bishop asks you all the questions, you fill out the form together. And I just said none. And he's like, well, and then they do these mind fucks where they try and get you to admit, and they try and coax you like, well, I've heard everything, Sister Dietz. I've heard it all. Nothing's going to offend me. If I take this to the first presidency, then they're going to ask me if there was anything unresolved in your life. And if I don't have a firm knowledge that you have confessed everything to me, then I can't proceed. And they're just going to reject it. Like fear mongering, like all this guilt and heavy weights, and that's all put on me. And I just said, no, this has no, and I told him this has no relevance on my request. My worthiness has nothing to do with, this. And then I also told him, like, you are standing, like, he had this whole free agency speech. And cause they try and talk you out of it because of sealing and temple covenants, that this whole sealing thing that Joseph Smith made up, where everyone has to be sealed to get to heaven, and if you're not sealed to someone, then you're not going to heaven. And that like perpetuates into this policy where they try as hard as they can to talk you out of it, because if basically they tell you that you're giving up your spot in heaven if you cancel the sealing.
Right.
You are forfeiting these sealing principles or these sealing blessings. You're a free agent and you have no way to heaven if we grant you the sealing. Like, it's more fear mongering, and they really believe that. Yeah. And so they push with all of their heart to talk you out of this sealing in their manipulative, condescending, mind fucking tactics. And so, like, for me, I said no. It's no relevance. He asked again and again and again. And I finally started crying in the interview. And then my dear current husband, who, bless his heart, was by my side, a never Mormon, stood up to him and said, okay, she's not going to answer you, so you need to stop asking. And furthermore, you are standing in the way of our free agency by not allowing this to go forward. And I was like, oh yeah, high five, ex-husband, high five, never Mormon husband. So, like, from that point on, he kind of decided to change the tune and say, what did he change it to? Oh, well, I just want to know if you have utilized the atonement in your life. And I'm like, well, yeah, of course I have. I've been a Mormon for the past 14 years.
Yeah, right.
That's not what the question says.
Yeah, right.
Oh, well, that's what it means. I'm like, and at that point, and literally I said, if you're going to reinterpret it that way, then we're fine. Then I will go ahead and write, I have utilized the atonement in my life. Well, that's all you need to do. And I'm like, fine, that's all I'm going to do. So I wrote, but let me tell you that was a lie. That was not what he had been pressuring me to say. Because my husband and I had a child out of wedlock because, once you leave the church, that's not really a big deal.
Right.
And so, but they knew that. And so they were trying really hard to get me to confess to that. And I'm like, nope, not going to happen. None of your business. Sorry. So
anyway, a couple of points.
Yes.
Richard in the comment section said, I thought this is particularly funny. One second here. Okay, there we go. So Richard said this. Just say when they're asking you about all these sins, just say that you sinned with I had sex with a general authority, but it's too sacred to tell you whom. I'd probably get him to shut up. But I wanted to say, from my own perspective, before you started into telling us about this process and about your own experience with it, it seemed just the whole process seemed ridiculous in my mind. But as you told us more and more, it switched from ridiculousness to fucking infuriating. It's
abusive.
Abusive.
It's abusive.
It is coercive. It is just every single point of the way is designed to get you to give the fuck up and just go home and say, oh, you know what? Fuck it. Forever, I'm just sealed to whoever. It doesn't even matter anymore. That person now I'm going to be theirs for eternity. It's just a system that is designed to stop you in your tracks, designed to stop you from leaving the church. And just like so many other parts of the church are designed to stop you from opposing it. It's just so frustrating. So, wow.
Yeah.
Colleen, tell us, sorry, go ahead.
Yes. No, did you have any other questions from the peanut gallery over there?
No, I think that was a bit, Julie just reflected what Richard said. I thought that was good fun. Just say you sinned with a general authority, they'll stop asking questions, right? But no, and I think
it's in the Holy of Holies, Holy Temple. I really can't tell you.
He anointed me from head to toe with oil. It was awesome. We took a bath in cinnamon whiskey. Okay. So you are going to be coming to Sunstone. Let's talk about that in just a second. You just recently, this last year, went to your first Sunstone in the smaller Sunstone in Arizona. And this is your first time at Salt Lake City Sunstone? Is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. I wanted to go 2 years ago when I was involved in the BYU thing. I was actually asked to present the BYU issue, but it just didn't work out. So this will be my first time that I get to go to the Salt Lake Sunstone. So yeah, I'm really, really excited about that, especially because the further I get into this post-Mormon community, like it's going to be phenomenal to meet people in person. I can't even describe to you, like, who knew that I would have this like virtual community that I was such a part of? Like, that's just, it sounds nerdy, but I'm so excited. So yeah, it's really exciting. Like all these people that I know virtually, I'm going to get to meet at Salt Lake or at the, the Salt Lake Sunstone. So I'm really excited about it. And including yours truly.
That's right.
Since we've never actually officially met.
No, I want to actually meet you in person. Like we've been chatting for a while. We've been friends for quite a while on Facebook and whatnot. I'm sorry, I have to read what
Yeah.
just in response to what we were saying earlier that I mean, of course, the comment section lags a little bit behind, but of course, Julie says that's the third anointing in the Holy of Holies there. But yeah,
Just
Julie
really get that camel nose in there.
all the way up to his hind haunches. Yep.
Oh
Hump
no.
deep. So it's going to be so cool to see you at Sunstone, actually meet you in person. And of course, everybody should know by now, if they listen to Mormon Happy Hour or Naked Mormonism, you and me and Marie are going to be doing a live show at Squatters. It's going to be so much
excited.
fun. I cannot fucking wait. Oh my God. I've been putting quite a bit of time into the notes that I'm bringing along the way to talk about our wonderful topic. Needless to say, tittling fingers here, just a twiddling fingers here. I think we're going to have a lot of fun. We're talking the demise of Joseph Smith. So, Colleen, I'm super stoked to have you on there. Do you want to tell people where they can find you on social media anywhere?
Sure. I'm on Facebook, but my podcast is we have a group on Facebook, Mormon Happy Hour podcast. We of course are on anywhere you find your podcasts. We're located. We also are on Instagram and Twitter. And we are, if you want to shoot us an email, it's mormonhappyhour@gmail.com. And we, our website is angelsonfire.org. And we are always looking for submissions for Mormon sex myths. I'm going to start collecting your, the first thing you did when you left the church, to kind of collect a lot of the where the life pro tips kind of need to be. So I'm going to start looking for collecting those stories of what did you do when you left the church? What were your first things that you did as a newly minted ex-Mormon? What did you try? What did you do? What was difficult? What was fun? I want to start getting those stories and talking about those on the air. So
that's
I'm really excited.
Awesome idea. Wow.
I think that's everything, right?
Right? Yeah, for sure. And also, everybody, come to Squatters. Come hang out with us. Squatters, July 27th. That's Friday. The second day of Sunstone. We're going to start at 8:00 p.m. where I think we have the second floor reserved of Squatters Pub. That's at 147 Broadway in downtown Salt Lake City. We really hope to see you there. There's a Trax line really close. There's Uber in Salt Lake City if you come and want to come hang out with us and play along with the drinking game that we're going to craft for a very special occasion. Play it safe, have a designated driver, or take public transit or Uber home. But Squatters is a really cool place. And Colleen, I'm really looking forward to hanging out with you and Marie at Sunstone and at Squatters afterwards and just having a good time. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I'm so excited. I think I podcast well drunk. I get the penis jokes just start flowing. So I can't wait.
Solo, you're able to break what is that rule, the filming rule where two women talking can't have to have a conversation for more than a few minutes that isn't referring to a man in film. I can't remember what the name of it is. You solo with alcohol, you break your own Manchurian rule or whatever it's called. It's not the Manchurian rule. Anyway, whatever.
Look that up. Get back to me on that. I'm intrigued.
If only I knew the term, that would have sounded a lot more articulate. And anyway, whatever. Colleen, thank you so much for joining us. I've really had a good time tonight. Thank you.
Yes. Those 10 flaps. You camel nose, you.
The 10 flaps. Oh, Bechdel. The Bechdel test. That's what it is. Thank you, Julie. Thank you.
Bechdel.
The Bechdel test.
I'm going to have to Google that. I will Google that.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching both live and in the live chat, as well as watching in the backlogs. And for the people who did join us very briefly, thank you for supporting at patreon.com/nakedmormonism. And we will see you next month. We are not going to be on the first Monday of the month, as I'm going to be visiting my brand new niece. I'm super excited about that. We'll be kicking off on the second week of August. It's going to be looking like August. I'm looking at a calendar, August 13th, I believe, that we'll be doing the next NaMo Home Evening. So thank you all so much for joining us, and we will catch you next time. Take care.